Okay, so we're diving into an educational environment that is so out there, it's almost hard to believe. This is based on a fascinating, wild, first-hand account, and trust me, this is not your typical high school story. It's more like a case study in beautifully organized chaos.
And this first quote? It just cuts right to the chase. Right from the get-go, every single day, the school's whole vibe was built around public humiliation. You've got to imagine being a student, forced to read a thought for the day about honesty, all while you know your name is on that list of kids who are behind on fees. This wasn't some random thing. It was just how they started the day.
So let's break down what a normal day even looked like here. This wasn't just a school with strict rules. It was a place with this constant low-level kind of torture. And it was all dished out through these bizarre punishments for the tiniest things.
So what kind of crimes are we talking about here? Not, major disciplinary problems. We're talking about stuff like moving an inch during prayer, forgetting to oil your hair. And these little slip-ups, they led to some seriously out-of-proportion consequences.
And this is where it gets truly wild. The dungeon. This was a real room, and it was specifically for kids who broke the hair oil rule. If you showed up with unoiled hair, you'd get dragged to this room and they would pour a 25-liter can of soybean oil over your head. It's just unbelievable, but this was a regular punishment.
The morning assembly, it was basically an endurance test. Students had to stand perfectly, totally still for these super long stretches, and any little movement meant you were getting punished. It got so bad that, like the quote says, you'd literally see kids who had fainted just lying on the ground. Just standing still was a high-stakes game.
This kind of crazy focus on punishment over actual education, well, it went all the way to the top. There was this one time the principal bought an award for herself. And what was the result? The entire school had to stand out on the assembly ground for 2 hours to celebrate her big win, totally derailing the whole school day for everyone.
But the dysfunction wasn't just about random cruelty. Oh no, it was also organized corruption. We're talking faculty meetings that weren't about, teaching strategies. They were basically brainstorming sessions for how to squeeze more money out of the students.
I mean, this was the actual question asked in a teacher's meeting. Not how can we make learning more engaging or how can we support our students? Nope. It was how can we loot these students in new ways? That one question tells you everything you need to know about their real motivations.
So their big idea was the smart class. On paper, it sounded amazing. They sold it to parents as this high-tech, advanced learning experience. But the reality? Oh, it was a total mess. We're talking one broken projector, a screen installed so badly it literally hit the ceiling, and, of course, a mandatory extra fee.
So picture this. A typical smart period was a comedy of errors. First, they'd kick out all the kids who hadn't paid the extra fee. Then, the teacher would spend ages just trying to get the projector to turn on. Then they'd have to call a student up to climb on a bench and fix the screen. And by the time they got any of that sorted, the bell would ring. Nothing ever got taught.
And the level of pettiness here is just wow. If one of the students who was waiting outside even peeked into the classroom for a single second, just to see the projector light up, they got charged 10 rupees. 10 rupees for a 1-second glance. Incredible.
So how did this whole high-tech experiment end? Not with some big administrative review. Nope. It ended when one day, a totally fed-up student just took the projector's display cable and went home with it. And that was it. The smart class was officially over. It's the perfect ending, really. It just shows how they cared way more about the idea of progress than actually educating anyone.
All right, if you thought all that was wild, just wait. The school's most dramatic moment was still to come. This is the part of the story where all the paranoia, all the corruption, and all the misplaced priorities we've been talking about just smashed together into one epic, school-wide manhunt.
And what kicked off this whole crisis? A love letter. A simple love letter, found by a teacher, addressed to a girl named Shamali. Now, in any normal school, this would be a minor thing, right? But at this school, it was a full-blown, code-red emergency that brought everything to a grinding halt.
The school's response was, well, it was completely unhinged. It was like a full-scale criminal investigation. Teachers just abandoned their classes to play detective. Staff who were on vacation actually came back to school to help with the search. They even called in another teacher who claimed he was an expert who could identify culprits just by looking at their faces. And right in the middle of this massive manhunt, what are the teachers freaking out about? Not the students, Not what this was doing to the school culture, but the fact that whoever wrote the letter had misspelled the name Shamali. That little detail just perfectly sums up how bizarre their priorities were.
The investigation was just relentless. Suspects were getting rounded up and taken to the famous dungeon for questioning. And as the pressure kept building and building, that experts started to focus on one student in particular, our narrator.
And then, it happens. The moment of accusation. Another student, a kid named Rajesh, stands up and points the finger right at our narrator, Hattie. Just like that, the entire crazy, investigative power of the school was bearing down on this one kid.
But this is where the story takes a hard left turn. Hattie, our narrator, had a secret weapon. He says he had a very innocent-looking face. So when they haul him in for interrogation, the teachers take one look at him and just can't bring themselves to believe he did it. Their whole theory completely shifts on a dime.
And just like that, the whole vibe of the interrogation flipped. They went from accusing him to trying to protect him. They were totally convinced he'd been framed, and they started pushing him to name the person who set him up. Don't be afraid, they kept saying. Just tell us his name. So backed into a corner, what does Hadi do? He does the only thing that makes sense in this crazy place. He names the person who had just accused him, Rajesh. The teachers bought it instantly, no questions asked. And the result was fast and final. As our narrator tells it, Rajesh was never seen at that school again.
And so, after all that chaos, the manhunt, the false conviction, the whole case was just closed. But the biggest question, who actually wrote that love letter in the first place, was never answered. It's still a mystery. And you know what? In a school where absolutely nothing made sense, maybe that's the only ending that truly fits.